Hello, Jerry Vicich here, and I'm going to do a demo in Scratchboard. Scratchboard is sort of an old school method of making art. You know, it's certainly tactile. It's not computer generated. And what Scratchboard is essentially, here's a larger board. You can see this is 8 by 10. What it is it's generally plaster of Paris put onto some type of a surface. In this case, this particular brand puts it on this mason board. And then India ink is put over it. And then you scratch away the ink to expose the white. So what's great about Scratchboard is it's wonderful for creating all sorts of lighting, and then also you get very high contrast. You can get great lights, great darks, and then you create your middle tones either by stippling or cross-hatching, which is something I'm especially fond of, or some other technique of mark making. So these are just different examples I've done for demos, and I'm going to do a demo here today for you guys. As I mentioned, they come in different sizes. So this 8 by 10, you know, is a medium size, and they come larger than that. I really like Ampersand. I like Ampersand Scratchboard's product. It's not the only Scratchboard product out there, but it is one of the more expensive. I just found that it cooperates so beautifully with the tools that I've really like using it. If you can find a board that works for you, that is less expensive, by all means use it. I know Tiger Art makes a particular type of Scratchboard, and then there's some that come out of England called Scratch Surface, or maybe I have the product wrong. But you don't have to use this, I just prefer this. And I like to buy these little snack packs of them where I can do demos on, and these are just little 5 by 7 panels. And when you buy one of these, you can get anything on Amazon Prime now. You can open it up and you've got separate boards in there, and generally there's some type of surface in there to protect them from each other. So I'm going to set this aside, and here's a fresh board. Now let's talk a little about the tools before we start. Since we're going to be scratching away ink, as I mentioned, this was a black board, and then we started scratching away the ink to get the desired effect. You need Scratchboard tools, and some folks actually use X-Acto knives. I find them a little too flimsy for my personal use, but if they work for you, by all means do. But they make these tips, just called Scratchboard tools, that fit right into a Crow pen holder. So if you have one of these, which you may have if you have a Crow pen already, you can take the tip out of whatever tip you have in there and insert the Crow tip in here. I like to have two handles because this tool here, let me see if I get in the camera right, is a little more rounded on the sides, and this one here is straight on the sides and pointy at the tip. So I call one like a spoon, one a sword and one a shovel, whatever you want to call them. But the one with the fine tip makes very fine lines, and then the one that is more of a rounded side, you can scoop away sides of things with it, and the point is just a little more blunt. They do get dull, so if you like doing Scratchboard, you can buy these little tips. They're not terribly expensive, and as one gets dull, you can put another one in. I have to find research to see if there's some way of sharpening them. Maybe there is. I can save some money. So you need these, and you need your Scratchboard. Also, I like to have my hand, something over my my work. This is just for eyeglasses. Something over my work when I'm doing it. I like to have something that my hand's resting on anyway, if my hand is resting on the surface of whatever art I'm doing. One of the main reasons is our hand has oil residue that's going to then transfer to the surface. And another reason is, as mentioned, this is ink, and you'll just be picking the ink up onto your hand, and you gradually start making a mess. I sometimes forget to put something down and will have my hand resting there, and I have to remind myself. So the Scratchboard tools, the surface to rest your hand on. Now, a real purist will swear against this, but there's certainly nothing wrong. In fact, I like doing it, of having some Sharpies in case you scratch something you didn't mean to because, you didn't intend to, because that's always the big question. What if I made a so-called mistake and a pack of these boards cost me $10? I just wasted, X amount of money because I made a mistake. With a Sharpie, you can go right back over it, and when the Sharpie dries, which doesn't take long, you can scratch away the Sharpie ink and start scratching again. I wouldn't use it too much because it is going to have a different consistency. Sometimes people artists like to actually paint India ink over something that they want to re-scratch, and then when that dries, go into it. But either way is okay. Some tape, because if you're going to transfer your drawing, which I'll show you in a little while, you want to know how to do that. And then some transfer paper. Now this is a product I really like. This is Sorel transfer paper. Looks like a box of sandwich wrap or something. And it comes in different colors. And this particular one is graphite, which is very akin to what we used to have back in the day. It was called carbon paper, where you wanted to type up, a letter and you wanted 2 copies of it. You had carbon paper between it, and you got 2 letters at once. Well, that's where CC came from, which is sort of an antiquated term now. But for our purposes, we can use this to transfer art onto another surface. It's always best if you can draw it directly on your board, but if you're trying to get it exactly as the way you initially intended it, you probably want to transfer it. So the transfer paper, the tape, and then whatever it is you're going to draw. So I drew this sort of light study of a character here, and what's happening with this guy is after I drew him, I figured out the direction of the light, which is coming in this way, and sort of figured, the planes of his head, where his temple and cheekbones are, nose, etc., and how the light would hit directly if it were coming from the left. So what would be lit and illuminated, and what would be in middle tone and dark. So by having this light study set up, I'm better able to use this as a guide when I'm scratching, so I'm not just, in the dark, so to speak. So what I did was I drew this on a separate piece of paper and made the drawing 5x7. Why 5x7? So that I can then fasten it onto this board, as I'm going to do in a minute. And then when I put my transfer paper on, I can transfer my drawing directly on top. See, I have a little excess here and here, but the drawing I did here is in a 5x7 format. So lining it up is important. And you want to fasten it well, because if you don't, you'll never get your drawing lined up again. So once you make sure it's where you want it on your board. This is akin to lining up paper with printmaking. As soon as you're sure you have it where you want it, you're going to tape it down firmly so it doesn't move. And, yep. It's not the neatest job of wrapping I've done. So you put some tape there. If you want to tape it even more so, that's fine. But you just want to make sure that this guy is not going to move on top of your board. Okay, so here's our light study. Excuse me. You also need a pencil, because I'm going to transfer this drawing onto here. I guess you need a pencil to do your initial study first, but that can be done in any medium, your light study. So I have a scrap piece of, not a scrap piece, just a used piece of the Sorel transfer paper here. You can use it multiple times. After a while, it'll just quit working and you have to get another sheet. So that came from, this box. And there's a dark side and a light side. And you always want to put the dark side or the shiny side down. Or if you're using color Sorel transfer paper, it comes in orange and yellow and other colors. You always put the shiny surface down. And so you slide it right under here. It's not so much of a problem if the transfer paper moves around, but if your drawing moves around, then you're going to end up with a very inconsistent transfer. The problem with transferring any drawing, obviously, is you lose that spontaneous quality that you get when you initially do a drawing. But so we try to stay somewhat loose while we're doing it, at the same time making sure we're translating, transferring what we need to transfer. So what I'm going to do is draw over this drawing. And don't be afraid to move your surface around, whatever you're working on, guys, drawing paper, canvas, Scratchboard, to your advantage, so you don't have to keep moving your arm and elbow around, but rather turn it as you see fit. This could probably be even a little bit tighter. I don't want to have trouble getting the transfer paper underneath, so this should do. But if you're making a finished piece, and arguably anything's a finished piece, I've seen gesture drawings that were worthy of hanging up and putting on the wall, or even an art gallery. That took a matter of seconds. So you never know when you're going to have a so-called finished piece that you really cherish. That finished piece can take 1,000 hours or 10 seconds. Okay, so the transfer. My paper has to be firm on top of here, and I'm going to come through here and draw all the lines I've already drawn. And I don't want to get too tight. I don't want to get too stiff, because you can always tighten up a loose drawing, but once you have a tight drawing, it stays tight. So I turn it as I need to. This obviously isn't as spontaneous as when you just draw, because then you're going to be much freer and looser. And when I'm all finished transferring this, I'm going to come through and make sure it all transferred onto my my Scratchboard. So he's got this funny little hat. I like to draw people with hats. Not sure why. I don't want to get into the psychology of that, but and I come down here. You don't have to put in all the value, but you can just kind of put in where everything's going to be placed. If you want to indicate a line showing where the temple is there, that's great. Where the plane of the face turns from the eye. Once again, unless you're drawing a carburetor or a jet engine, you need it to be exact. Sometimes you need things to be exact, but just don't get too tight in the transfer process, because they may look alike, but the transfer drawing, or God forbid, or tracing, sometimes we have to trace, is not going to have the spontaneity, the humanity of the lines that you initially used to make your artwork with. So I don't know who this guy is, somebody who, sits inside of my brain. I can look now and see, and I can see that it's transferring. I don't know if you guys can, but I can clearly see it's transferring. That's going to be the most important thing for when I start scratching, that I can see it. I want to see where I'm at. Okay, let's keep moving here. Now, I didn't have to lift it and show you that, but you can always lift it to see that it is indeed transferring. What if you did the whole thing and you realized you had the paper turned down on the wrong side? Then you have to do it all again, and that's kind of annoying. Okay, once again, if you want to plot out any shadows, that's great. Shadow where the sternocleidomastoid's coming down. He's got an Adam's apple there. I always tell my life drawing students that hands will fit the entire, can cover your face. Not so with this character. He's obviously, a stylized character. So his hands are small for his face. I guess his head's big for his body. And stylized doesn't mean that, we're copying somebody else's style. It means, style something that just becomes manifest. The longer you draw and paint, the more your style just starts to surface. You can't go to, Target and buy yourself an art style, it's something that just develops over time. I really try to warn students against trying to be another artist. There's nothing wrong with being inspired by another artist, absolutely not. you know. But when you're trying to be somebody else or copy their style, you just kind of end up doing a stiff version of contrived version of what they're doing. You all have the ability to, create, develop your own style, just as, the way you walk is uniquely yours, and the way you talk, all of your idiosyncrasies are yours. What comes out in your artwork after a period of time of development is uniquely yours, and that's something to be cherished, not inhibited. I may have him pretty well transferred. I'm going to check again. The chin's somewhat lacking. If you put some lines you didn't mean to, it's not the end of the world. Or if you finished transferring and you realized there was something else you wanted to put in there. Is my hat getting in the way? Something else you wanted to put in there, you can actually draw on your board with your graphite, with your pencil. So I'm just about ready to roll here. I really want to get these shadows placed. And you can see if I didn't have this paper taped down, if I lifted that up and tried to put the paper back where I thought it was, it's going to be a disaster. Okay. He's transferred. Up. Almost. Now he's transferred. So check and make sure it's transferred well. Once again, I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can, but when I start scratching, you'll be able to see that it was this drawing that was transferred. So make sure it's where you want it, guys. And if you're positive it's where you want it, you can go ahead and take your drawing off. Because if you try to line it up exactly again, it's a near impossibility. Okay, Scratchboard tools. Now, once again, I like working with this point and this sort of a scoopy tip here too. Some folks use sandpaper, and I've seen people use steel wool and other types of surfaces, dental tools even. Anything that's going to scratch away the ink, if it works for you, great. I tend to stay with, these two most of the time. I've used X-Acto knives before. They can really kind of work when you're trying to get a super, super fine line for a very, very slow gradation. Okay, so I'm going to start with this this point, and I'm going to come in here, and I have my pencil lines down there already, and I'm going to start scratching away I'm just kind of redrawing it again. This isn't the fun part. So I'm drawing the guy right back onto the board, and I'm sure you can see that. Good. Okay. And once again, what I'm doing is scratching away the India ink and exposing the plaster of Paris or whatever chalky medium may be under there. And generally you want to scratch away, especially when you start rendering. If you scratch towards you, it doesn't seem to work as well. So generally scratch away. I turn mine around quite, different ways without realizing it. Sometimes I'll scratch towards me, sometimes I scratch away, but generally, especially with rendering, with cross-hatching or something, you want to work away from it. And the harder you press, the more clear the line would be. If you want a very, very, very delicate line, you can take a lot of the weight off your hand and get a different result. So here he comes. And, I'm being loose, but I'm not being careless. There's a difference between being intentional, or just careless and sloppy and trying to be loose. You're loose but focused. That's important to remember. If some of this gets tedious, obviously, you can always speed up the video. You can always speed up the demo. Okay, let's get that eye. And I've got this reference photo, so if there's anything that I'm not really clear on, I wanted to get it to look like this guy. I've got my not reference photo, reference drawing, my light study there. And work at what pace works for you. You know, don't be in a hurry. If you're in a hurry, you'll probably make a mess. And I think we're always, you know, one of the biggest problems with art, you know, students go through so many times is we're in a hurry for it to look good. And so, you know, we have this angst about wanting the thing to turn out like we want it to, which is counterproductive because we usually end up getting in a hurry and making a mess. Sometimes you do want to draw very fast. Other times, depending on what you're doing, you draw more slowly. You'll find you have a lot of control with Scratchboard. Oh, my camera's bouncing around. Because the friction of the ink on top of the plaster of Paris tends to cause your tool to resist enough where I'm drawing and thinking at the same time, where you don't really lose control. It doesn't slide at all. Most of my characters that I draw, you know, a lot of them come out of my sketchbook unless I'm developing somebody specific, but I have no idea where they come from. You know, they're just somewhere in the dark recesses of my mind. You know, there are folks that come in and just literally just start scratching away the light. They don't even do a line drawing. You know, and there's all kinds of art where we do that, where we just start drawing the light. With Scratchboard, it's probably important to point out that we are drawing the light, which is the opposite of when we're drawing with a pencil or charcoal on white paper, where we're putting in the values, the middle tones and the lights, excuse me, the middle tones and the darks. With Scratchboard, we're drawing the light and then eventually middle tones. I don't know what kind of hat this is. I think it just reminds me of one my grandfather used to wear. Okay, let's get that hand. Boy, I didn't transfer that very well. Let's see if I can remember what a hand looks like. Knuckle up here. He's pointing at someone for some reason. You know, don't make your shadow lines too dark because you know, eventually want line to be almost eliminated, but not always, you know, completely eliminated. Depends on what kind of style you're doing. But if you're drawing something that's pure light, it's not going to be outlined at all. You're going to see light against dark. So if you have areas where you're definitely going to be developing your light and shadows, don't get too thick of a contour line that you're going to work against. I think I'm pretty close to be able to start scratching the light. Excuse my noisy air conditioner in the background. There's plane up here, I forgot. Plane coming across there. You know, understanding, you know, how light describes form's real important with this stuff, you know, and it's stuff we pick up in, you know, drawing in composition class or drawing 1 class, you know, how light illuminates form. So, you know, we're trying to trick the viewer into seeing 3D form on a flat surface. I mean, that's so much of what representational drawing is about anyway. So learning how to light forms, cylinders, cones, spheres, cubes, and then being able to take that knowledge and use it for drawing, you know, pretty much whatever you want is really important if you're going to do representational drawing. Guess what? I don't have my cloth under my hand. Okay, If you guys were in class with me, you could chastise me. So what I want to do here now is start scratching away some light. So I'm going to come in here. I think I have a little shadow up under there. And I'm just going to start making lines following his form. And this is just an initial stage. I can change directions if I want. You know, sometimes with sketching, with cross-hatching, we'll go the same direction all the time, which can be kind of cool too. Okay. Now don't lose sight of the fact that you're drawing light, you're not drawing the dark. So get your, initial light all kind of plotted out here. The face is made up of a series of planes. Am I taking it out of the screen? Uh-oh. It's made up of a series of planes and, with skin and muscle wrapped around it. And understanding those directional changes is really, really, important. Here I am scratching towards me, and I'm telling you guys to scratch away. We all fall into our own bad habits. The scratching away just seems to, the tool seems to respond to it better. Okay, so we're starting to get some light there, as you can see. Big fun. Oh, I didn't plot this shadow out up here, so let's get this up here. And start scratching away some light here. Notice how I'm turning my board. You can't do this if you have a giant canvas or you're working on a mural, but anything that you can physically turn while you're working on it, take advantage of that and turn it as necessary. Okay. So this is hatching what I'm doing. This is not called cross hatching because I haven't crossed anything yet. So this is just pure hatching. Let's start getting some of the lighting here where his sleeve is. Now, sleeve's on an arm, and an arm is, break it down to cylinder. Learning how to light cylinders is important for learning how to light arms and legs and anything that, is going to have kind of a cylindrical form to it. Okay. If you're uncomfortable going long, you can make shorter strokes and just build them up from there. Once again, the control you have is pretty amazing with this stuff. Okay, we just about have the basic lighting put down. The hand here. I don't know if there'd be light hitting the top of his arm there, but anyway. Just a minute. I'll be right back. Look at that for a moment. Had to get a sharper tool. Okay. Back at it. Now, well, a little bit more here. We're going to start scooping away some more light because we want lights, middles, and darks. So we'll get a little bit of that taken care of in a moment. I'm going to just start playing around with some reflected light back here. You know, this is a long way from finished, but already you can see it's a cool aesthetic. So I'm starting to cross hatch there a little bit, so I'm going to do some more of that. Cross hatching, when you're doing it, try not to do it at right angles at 90 degrees, so that you have you know, more of a lighted effect rather than a textural screen door effect. Well, here I am doing 90 degrees right after I told you not to. But I'm going to go over that again anyway in a few minutes. I got the sun creeping in my window here. I'm going to have to close this curtain. So what I'm going to do here is pick up my scooper tool, and I'm going to come down here and actually start scraping away some of the light. As you can see, it's going to have more of a dramatic effect. You know, once again, don't get in a hurry. If you scraped something you didn't mean to, if you went over a line, so to speak, which by the way is never really a problem, okay? Unless you're trying to make, you know, real technical drawing. But if you do that, you know, you can use your Sharpie, but don't think of the Sharpie as something that you're going to depend on. Think of it as something you use if you have to. Kind of like, you know, when you're first learning how to draw, you know, my students, usually I have them draw without erasers for quite a while because it makes us focus more rather than just thinking it's okay, I can always erase it. So the Sharpie's there, or the India ink, whatever it is you want to use. I think I have to close this curtain. For you to use. But don't think of it as something that is a fix-all. Hope you guys can still see. Yeah, I think you can still see. Okay, I got light coming from everywhere. Brother, I didn't expect this. Close another curtain. This is the part of the video you can really speed up. Well, that takes care of most of it. Okay, and the shadow of me takes care of the rest of it. Can we still see that? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to keep scooping here. You hear me blowing on the Scratchboard. That's because the excess ink is building up along with some of the chalk or plaster of Paris, and you want to get rid of that. Kind of gets in the way of everything. Do this alone and don't wear a mask because you will need to blow in your drawing. Social distance when you're making your Scratchboard. Okay, where do I want to go from here? I'm going to scoop out a little bit more. Scoop out a little above his nostril there. Clean this up a little more. I'll scoop some of his eyebrow out in a little bit. So anywhere the light's hitting directly, you know, I'm thinking about that. Scoop some of this out here. You can also come in and clean up the edges all you want. And you know, as you get closer and closer to your finished piece is where you can come in and refine it more and more. Generally in art, detail, you know, fine stuff is last. Sometimes when you're doing Scratchboard though, people like to get, you know, right into detail. Like if you're doing real fine hair on a horse or a cat or something, obviously you're gonna get into the detail pretty early. But when something's lit, especially like this, you want to get all your lighting down and then get concerned with any, you know, real fine detail. Generally you go from general to specific with the majority of art. Okay, I'm going to pick up my point again and hit some other areas I want to work on. Even though areas are in dark, it doesn't mean they can't have any lines drawn in them at all. You know, the dark with Scratchboard is fairly opaque. I mean, the black is opaque, but generally speaking, you know, the majority of things we draw or paint, shadows are transparent. You can actually see texture underneath any shadow, you know, like a shadow on a carpet or on a wooden floor. You can usually see, you know, the pattern or the texture right underneath. So I'm starting to give him an eyebrow here. I'm playing with, I'm making up a little reflected light, which really helps with this stuff, since this medium makes such sharp contrast of dark and light. Unless you're going to do an entirely, you know, photorealistic piece, which obviously you could do. But you know, playing around with your lights, middles, and darks as much as you can, and playing with some reflected light only helps the piece to appear even more three-dimensional. Okay, where am I going to go from here? I think I'm going to come up with a scooper again. Just get a little bit under here. A reflected light under there. I'm going to keep working, but you can see he's getting more and more lit, as light describes form, not lit as is used in other senses these days. Okay. I jump back and forth between the point and the scoop. Some of you may be a little more, organized than I am. I love cross-hatching. I was forced to do it in college many years ago, and I hated it, and wanted, to fake my death rather than go to class on the day we were going to do cross-hatching. But then I fell in love with it, and I just kind of automatically do it now. I do it in my sketchbooks all the time, and it's called mark making. It's a type of mark making, which is really very cool. So when you go to a museum or a gallery and get to see work in person, I mean, it's great seeing them in our art history classes or magazines and such, but when you get to see the work in person and you see the scale and you see the artist mark making and the colors in person, it's an entirely different experience. And when you get, if you get to get up close to a Raphael and see the brushstrokes, it's almost a religious experience versus seeing a representation of it. I'm just rambling on stuff while you're watching this, hoping I'm not boring you to death. Here I am coming towards me again, which most Scratchboard artists would advise against. Keep in mind also, something I pointed out earlier is these blades can get dull. So it's a good idea to stock up on a few of them because, if you're working, so many times we're working, into the wee hours, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And not only is Amazon Prime not going to deliver anything to your house in an hour, but you're not going to be able to, to get in your car and drive anywhere to pick anything up. And so what we do is sometimes we will work with inferior tools, hoping for the best. Where the best remedy is to have enough tools handy that you can pick up a better tool if the one wears out. Okay, where am I going next? I'm talking to myself, that's where I'm going. Drawing and painting and making art is such a personal thing. As teachers, we've got to demo and talk, but generally, when we're doing it for someone else to watch, for a long period of time, it's pretty boring. Because, we're just in that realm, in that zone, and this would be the part of a demo in class where students would start walking away and seeing what's on their cell phones. Then they'd come back and want to see what happened later. The beauty of the video demo is you can stop and start it, or speed it up. Okay, what next? Let's give some of the pattern to his hat here. And give some indication of the stripes. Stop and look at your work every so often. We can get into the zone so much that we start zoning out, and it's important to stop and look at your art and stand back from it and see how it's progressing. we can't see the forest for the trees if we're always on top of the thing, working on it without, stepping back and looking at it and seeing it as objectively as we possibly can. If there's other people, around that can look at it, get their suggestions on it. If the suggestions are lame, ignore them. If they're great, take the advice. Your family and friends don't have to be artists to know what looks good. If museums and galleries had only artists in them, they'd all be closed. Well, they're closed right now, but they'd all be closed and go broke. This is fun to do in still life too, if you set up a still life with a single light source, as you would in a drawing class, and figure out your lighting lightly in pencil, right on a piece of Scratchboard, and then start scratching away the lights and figuring out your midtones and coarse shadows and reflected light. It really, really makes beautiful work. It's an old method, it's akin to engraving. Somewhat related loosely to printmaking in the sense, very similar process for some monotones, or etching, more akin to etching, I think, but not the same thing. I don't want any printmakers yelling at me. Okay. I'm going to work more. I mean, who's to say that that's not finished for whatever reason you wanted it to be? But I'm going to work some more on it and develop it even more. And I'm going to do some fun stuff with it too in a few minutes. So getting some more, the middle tones in there. We've got the lights and the middle tones and the really darks in this case. Of course, you could work into your darks and still keep it pretty dark if you wanted to. I think this piece here, I was actually rendering in the darks even more so, where there's none of that solid black like we see in this one, but both aesthetics are cool. So I'm cross-hatching a lot here. And if you want to get good at cross-hatching, when you make sketches in your sketchbook, start cross-hatching all your darks and middle tones. If you're working, pencil and white paper, or any medium, that's dark on top of light, you just start drawing in your darks and middle tones. Besides being able to create something that you're proud of, or you're going to sell, or it's for publication, or whatever the case may be, we can't lose sight of the fact that when you're in the zone, it's just a hell of a lot of fun. Nothing else in the world matters. It's your own little therapeutic world that no one can take from you. He's looking like him. I've cheated a little bit. Oh, I got this drawing stuck on some plastic there. He's his brother. In doing the preliminary work, guys, always, with any type of illustration, when you have something specific that you're going to draw or paint, the preliminary work is so important, because just winging it, you're usually not going to get the results you want. Was there a war happening outside those helicopters. You're usually not going to get the results you want, and then you've wasted time and have to start over, and you wasted materials. Doing the preliminary work, going through the process. Art is very much, this type of art especially, process-oriented. There's, more spontaneous types of art, which, are obviously valid as well, but when you have something that you want to turn out, a certain way, the preliminary work is so important. That doesn't mean you can't, change the plan along the way because you've discovered something else that's going to make it even better. But without a foundation, without a game plan, you're just spitting in the wind. And that's tough to do with a mask on. I don't know how long people watch this demo. Obviously, I'm doing it, during quarantine in the year 2020. Okay, what I'm going to do next that's fun. Well, I'm going to render them a little more, and then I'll do next what's fun. Zygomatic bone in there a little bit. I may have gotten too much light up in here, which is something I can deal with the Sharpie later if I want to. You can come in and touch things up with the Sharpie. It's not going to have the same blackness, the same type of black that the initial ink that's on the Scratchboard does. Sometimes you can achieve that better if you use India ink. But if this is printed in black and white, the different types of temperatures, hopefully it's not a different temperature, but different types of black are not going to show up. If it's in color, of course, you'll see the temperatures. There's warms and cool blacks, etc. My head keeps bumping into my camera there. Okay, so I can keep working on this, which I'm going to come back to and do some more, but I want to show you something that's fun. Now this is cool, and if you wanted to have a background in it, if you wanted to do additional stuff to it and make some type of a landscape or what have you, or some type of a crazy, setting or whatever the case may be, that's great. What I'm really trying to show here is the method, the technique. But what's fun to do with this, especially since it has a lot of hatching going on with it, and I'll come back and hatch some more in a while, is to start playing with the background. Now we've got dark, middle, and light. So, especially against the dark, if we have some light going on, it's fun. You can see with this guy, I did a lot of cross-hatching in the background, and it's fun. It has a cool quality to it. But if you want to start cross-hatching, especially on the lit side, you can be pretty loose over here because you don't have to worry about, starting and stopping at a certain point because you're right up against the white there. So if you start doing this, the length of the stroke is probably, kind of a personal thing. You just don't know. Some folks might make a longer line. Some folks might make a shorter line. There's no set number of how many lines you do. But try not to make right angles, especially if you're only going two different directions. Try not to make any 90-degree angles. And try to keep turning your board so that you can get a variety of directions. Rather than turning your arm, your wrist, breaking your arm, turn your board. Don't get careless. It may look like I'm being a little cavalier here, but I'm really focused on the hatching. And when I'm right up against the light like that, I can just work right into it. Then after I do this for a while, I'll show you even another fun trick. This is a stylized drawing. That doesn't mean that it's any less valid than, you know, so-called realistic drawing. But I'm doing some things to it to make it even more playful, more whimsical. Don't go into auto mode with this. Keep changing direction. I keep going the same directions there now. Keep turning your board. Or if you're working on a big piece, you know, walking around, if you have a big canvas on the floor, like Jackson Pollock, you can walk around your canvas. You know, don't try to twist your arm and shoulder and elbow all kinds of different directions to make the marks you want to make. The more I cross hatch, you know, this is hatching. Then when I cross over it, it becomes cross hatching. The more you cross hatch, the lighter it's going to become because the more chalk or plaster of Paris is exposed. I don't know if ampersand uses chalk or plaster of Paris. I never asked them. See, I'm looking for a direction I haven't gone. If you take a 2D design class, you know, one of the, you know, principles of picture making that is 2D design is so important, folks. One of the principles of picture making that they use is repetition. Because, you know, with your art, you're usually, almost always, unless you're intentionally making something discordant, but you're trying to get your work to be unified. But at the same time you want it interesting, and they're two opposite ends of the spectrum sometimes, because interesting can mean variety, and too much variety, all of a sudden it's chaotic. Interesting and so unified can be too boring. You know, if you make a work of art that looks just like a checkerboard, you know, it might be functional, but it's begging the question, what else can you show me, due to the boring, you know, repetitiveness. So when you're cross-hatching, the unity comes in the fact that they are cross-hatch lines. It can become chaotic if you are sloppy and messy and don't pay attention to going different directions. You know, and lift with each stroke. That's important if you're cross-hatching in pencil or pen or paintbrush, or, you know, lift with each stroke. In other words, after you stroke, the drawing tool, in this case the Scratchboard tool, is coming off the surface, as I think you can see. Now, you may think I'm ruining this, and you may be right. No, I'm not ruining it. You'll see what happens in the end. But it's a chance to take. You know, first time I tried doing something like this, and I was inspired by another artist. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? little careless there. You know, if you sign your work, you can even scratch your name right into the board. So you can come out as far as you want with this, you know. You can do the board in its entirety with this, or you can just, you know, create sort of a crosshatch aura. If you like the flat black background with Scratchboard, it can work really, really well. You know, like this. If it looks like it's easier than doing it with pencil, it's because it is. If you do stop it all of a sudden, you know, it's a good idea maybe just to stop it with some hatching, you know, sort of let it dissipate. Whatever works for you, you know. Sometimes people like to do log jamming. I'll show you some of that. It's where you go one direction and then another direction without even cross-hatching. You're just, one set of hatch lines starts where the other one stopped. You can play with this and create, you know, not only a fun pattern in the background or wherever, you know, it's kind of a flat pattern, but at the same time, you know, cool mark making. That's more of the log jam effect there. Some people call it basket weaving. I prefer log jamming. And then, of course, you can, you know, cross-hatch over log jamming too if you want to. Let's get a little more done here. Now, I want to do some back here too. Now, listen, this is dark against dark, so when you get dark against light, it really has a nice quality to it. Here I've got light against light, but the light of my character is lighter than the background. That's why you can still see him. It's really important to understand value juxtapositions. If you want something to stand out, you cannot surround it by the same value. That is the same range of light to dark. If you make a gray image and surround it with a gray background, you see nothing. And you can spend a whole lot of time drawing something that you've rendered invisible because you weren't paying attention to what values were surrounding whatever it is you wanted to show up in your drawing or painting. Understanding value is really important. Value contrast is great, you know, a big range of lights and darks, and value juxtapositions, really super important. I've seen many beginner students overwork their pieces where you couldn't see anything because everything was the same value. They could have spent 100 hours on it. It might have been technically brilliant in terms of, you know, the drawing and the technique, but since the decision-making process was lacking, usually in the preliminary stage, they ended up with something that if you put it up on a wall, it was all super dark or all middle tone. And then, of course, you know, sometimes when no value is put into something, it's all light on a white piece of paper. So I got this going on, you know, around the dark part of him as well. If any of you guys have quit watching this and started watching reruns of Ozark by now, I don't blame you. I don't know if you can see, I have my drawing table kind of taped off here because I need to know what the camera can see. If you do a video like this that's up close, you know, you can set your camera up. My camera keeps shaking, darn it. And then you can, I didn't realize how much it was shaking. Then you can, it just adds to the quality of the video, right? Then you can make sure whatever it is you're doing, the camera's picking up rather than, you know, working out of the camera or something and thinking the camera's picking it up. If you have a taped off area or marked off area, provided your camera didn't move. Wow, this is going to be one shaky video. I just realized that. That'll be fun. We'll call it, we'll say there was an earthquake going on. A long earthquake. Stop doing that. I think I stopped it. We'll call this video scratch and shake. Has that been happening the whole time? You guys getting nausea watching this. Yes, speed up this video. You know, sometimes stop and just squint at it. You know, squint and see if some areas are lighter or darker than you meant for them to be. Hopefully darker so you can scratch out the light. But when you squint, anytime you squint at anything, you know, everything's reduced to values. You just see darks, middles, and lights. You don't see any detail. So squinting's always the litmus test for value. Besides stepping back and looking at your work, squinting to make sure you got the values where you want them. And when you're drawing something in person, whether it's a still life in a drawing class or you're lighting a figure in life drawing, if you squint, you see the darks, middles, and lights. And that does so much of the work for you. And also when you're making your art, whether you're looking at what you're drawing or you've created it from your head, squinting is a good thing. Put your work, you know, set it up on a mantle or, you know, get your TV, whatever, some place where you can get away from it and look at it for a while. I've done work before where I, you know, was working on it and decided, hey, I need some sleep. And I set it up somewhere where the next, you know, first thing the next morning I'd see it and then all of a sudden have a, you know, to make a discovery of like, aha, I still need to do this or this to it. So seeing it objectively as we can see our own art is important. And squinting to see those values. Okay, after you've done this for a while, and if you like that, oh, it's a lot of fun. You can even get lighter against the dark just by cross-hatching more, you know, and you can make it more uniform by cross-hatching the entire background. But now this is if you're not adverse to using a Sharpie. I got different tips here. One's a fine tip, and I've got another one. Where did it go? That is a thicker tip. Is that it? He's here. And you know, the great thing about I know with a Sharpie you can scratch it away again, and and in India ink you can. I'm not sure about other pens. You may or may not be able to, but if you wanted to come in here now and then sort of create a dark aura around the character. Now I really hate outlining, so in a sense this is a kind of outlining, which I just told you I hate, but it gives a cool effect with the Scratchboard. And if you blacked out something you didn't mean to, just make sure your Sharpie mark has dried, so you don't smear it, and then you can come back in and scratch right back into it and expose the chalk again. About scratching, while we're talking about that, never scratch too hard, because if you scratch too hard, you've scratched through the ink, through the chalk or plaster of Paris underneath, and onto the back of it, and onto your masonite board. You have nothing to work on. So don't scratch too hard. If you find you have to scratch too hard, you probably have a dull tool, and then it's time to you know, pick up that extra one you have. Or order it from Amazon Prime and go to sleep and wait for it to come. This thing seems to be running out of ink. Sometimes you get chalk buildup on your Sharpie, and that's why it will cooperate as well. And then even after you do this, I mean, you can come back in and work this drawing as much as you want. You've all probably had that experience of having a drawing you really, really like and you're proud of, you know, and you can't wait for mom to put it on the refrigerator and all this stuff, and then you keep working on it and you ruined it. We've all done that. And then, you know, when is a drawing finished? I mean, there's the more you do it, the more you know. You sort of intuitively know when it's finished after you've been drawing and painting long enough. You just know it's done. Does that mean you can't come back and do something else to it if you want? Of course not. But you reach a point where it's like, I've said what I have to say, and you know, it's going to speak for itself now. That's another reason it's important to step back and look at the work, because if we keep working it past the point of where it was finished or coming along really well, that's just too bad. But that's all part of the growing pains of making art. You know, don't waste your money on your tools, or worse, your time, by getting careless, you know, with the work. Nothing wrong with starting over. You know, that could be part of the process. Sometimes you make a piece and you're like, "This, I just didn't get it with this. This just didn't work. I'm going to do another one." Does that mean the first piece was worthless? No. What did you learn from that piece? And then you can you know, keep that in the front of your mind when you're making the next piece. I picked something up from that last piece that I don't want to make the same mistake with this piece. So if you're going to do anything more to this, you want to make for sure that your Sharpie is dry there. Otherwise, you're going to start smearing your Sharpie ink around. And I do want to work on it a little bit more. I'm going to do just a little bit more to it. But you can see it's you know, really getting this this nice you know, aesthetic. You know, this mark making aesthetic that's just wonderful. It's textural. You shouldn't walk up to a work of art and touch the texture of it, but just being able to have the visual relationship of, you know, a visual tactile relationship, let's call it, where you can see the texture, respect the texture, because it is literally a physical texture. Just like, you know, if you're painting and you have layers of paint, or you're painting impasto, and a Van Gogh painting, so many layers of paint, has a texture, and that's another great reason to go to a museum, to see the texture in person. It's a wonderful thing in art. I'm rambling now. I should probably shut up and just draw. Okay, do I want to do anything else to him? You guys aren't answering me. So, yeah, I want to clean up a couple more things. Now, if you're bored with this video and you've gotten everything you want to out of it, you can take a break. It's been an hour and 15 minutes, and come back later. That's what I say when I'm in class. You guys can, I think you've pretty much learned everything I'm trying to show you. I'm going to come through and do some more stuff, and maybe I'll ruin it. Let's see. Once again, I'm making sure my Sharpie is dry. I don't want to, and there's another good reason to set something on top of your work, so you don't smear things. Why am I using this thing, which is a very smooth material? It's for cleaning glasses, or a chamois for cleaning your computer screen, because it won't scratch your work. It won't scratch your work. You can put if you have any soft material that's not scratchy, you can put it down, But if you got something that's coarse that you're resting your hand on top of, you may be making unintentional marks in your work. Okay, what else do I want to do to his face? Let's see here. Rid of a couple of lines. And there are Scratchboard purists out there who would say the man's a charlatan for doing this. If I'm going to be labeled that, okay. I'm going to initial it. Oh, yeah, here I am working with my Sharpie and not letting it dry. For the record, it's August, and it's been over 100 degrees outside for the past couple of weeks, so I think it should dry fairly quickly. Well, let's not take any chances. I can't even remember what it was I was going to work into now. Actually, I think we'll probably just wrap it up here, and I really thank you for taking the time to watch my my demo, and hope you can put it to use for your personal purposes, or if you do it professionally, you're doing it for a project in class. It is a way I go about of doing Scratchboard. Thank you for your time.